Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host. I totally just cut myself off. My guest today is a sophomore from McKenzie High School, Devon Lawson. Devon, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're going to have to do that again.
Okay.
So here we go. False start. Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. My guest today is a sophomore from McKenzie High School, Devon Lawson. Devon, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Patty, for having me.
So this is really cool. You have been working tirelessly on campaigns. I know it's kind of the off season for all of that stuff. And you've been doing some media outreach, trying to get the word out that you are pushing an initiative to lower the voting age to 16. And I wanted to have you on. Actually, you reached out to me and you said, hey, would you like to help me elevate the voice on this? And I was absolutely on board. So welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
So we're going to talk today, like I said, about trying to push to lower the voting age for 16. I got to be honest, I don't know exactly how I feel about this. So this isn't an endorsement by any means, but I was really interested to have you on to talk to you because I'm impressed with what you're doing, especially like I had said before, you're a sophomore in high school, so you're very young, but I've seen you get very involved in the last couple of years. I was made aware of you because you were working on the Michelle Emmons campaign for, was it state representative?
Do you remember House District 12?
That was an unsuccessful run, but I think both of you probably learned just a tremendous amount. So We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But let's get started kind of getting to know who you are. So what got you so motivated to get involved in civics?
Well, it was fifth grade. Donald Trump had been president for a while now. And at that time, I politically identified as a Republican. And, and if you ask my friends, they'll tell you that I was absolutely obsessed with Donald Trump. But, after, seeing all the crazy things he did, and then another friend approached me and showed me hey, this is what's going on. You really want to like a guy who's doing all this? I was like, no. And so then I politically moved towards the Democrats. And, when it first started out, I was a moderate Democrat. I was kind of sparse, but I wanted to get politically involved to change my community. So I volunteered on the Peter DeFazio campaign. And I think that was either fifth or sixth grade that I was volunteering on this campaign. And, because I was in a sixth grader or whatever, I had nothing else to do. So I had the ability to just make all these phone calls sitting at my desk, and I was able to make more phone calls than anyone else on the campaign. So next year, when he ran for re-election, actually, this May of 2021, I was reached out and asked to be an intern, and I gladly took that. But after he dropped out and Doyle Canning hopped in the race, I got involved with her campaign, and I've been really involved civically and politically, and I've moved towards more progressive democratic socialism. And I've gotten to know lots of candidates. I've worked on now 27 campaigns, and I've actually gotten to work on 23 successful campaigns. And so I've really got to meet communities and come together on all these sort of issues.
Yeah. And the criticism that I've gotten about you behind the scenes is that you work too hard. So I've heard that from people, and that's a good thing. So congratulations on just jumping right in. First of all, I'm impressed with what you've done, and it's really cool to see. I want to talk a little bit before we get into the initiative about what you just talked about. I was unaware of this. I didn't know that you were a Trumper at one point. And it's interesting to me to have conversations with people on both sides. People are constantly ebbing and flowing in the political landscape of where they fall, and I would kind of consider myself in a lot of ways to be somewhat moderate or even conservative on certain things. I don't know if I could in a short time explain why, maybe on a later date, but I want to hear from you about that. What was it that was your core value that kind of made you early on in your taste in politics, kind of made you feel like you might be a Republican?
Well, I'm from Oklahoma, and I grew up in a conservative household. And so, that's just kind of the community I grew up in. So it's automatically oh, this is what they're doing. I kind of agree with what's going on here. I didn't really know anything about the Democrats. I didn't really want to do the research either. So I just kind of went along with that. And, what really motivated me, to get out of the Republican Party was a strong sense of motivation to stand up for people. It's growing up, my mom always told me to stand up for yourself, and so I've done that, and I've stood up for others as well. And to see all these like things happening like under the Trump administration, it was like, yeah, this isn't cool. And so then I moved.
Yeah, my hope would be that we would have two functioning parties, and that you
Yes,
could feel like, because I have some crossover with even libertarians, and I'm sure you do as well.
I do
But the
too. Yeah.
reality is like when it comes down to it, it's about civil rights and it's about protecting people's individual rights. And I think we need a functioning two parties, and we do not have that right now. We have some adults on the left, and there's two or three decent Republicans, and two of them just stepped down, or one of them lost. But yeah, anyway, so let's talk about the initiative, and then we'll come back around and we'll talk a little bit more about core values and what you've learned
Okay.
over these last few years. So like I said before, you've been pushing local legislators to lower the voting age to 16. How has this been received by, our local 541 representatives?
Oh boy, really difficult actually. I've sent a letter to just about every representative who was elected. I haven't sent a letter to the representative-elects yet, but I'm going to get there. I mean, obviously, a good show of like how 541 community supports it is like I had to reach outside of my district just to get this bill proposed. Like my legislatures didn't want to do it, and I know that Charlie Conrad, who's the new state representative of House District 12, isn't going to want to do it. And so thankfully Representative Nose agreed to propose that constitutional amendment.
Yeah, tell me about them, where they're located, what area. Kind of read a little bit about it in some of your media outreach, but tell me about that.
About Rob Nose or
Yes, Rob Nose.
okay,
He's
yeah.
totally on board. I know that he was a young idealist himself. Is kind of what he was talking about in the interviews that he's been asked about this. And what is how did that dynamic start? How did you reach out to him, and what was that response like?
Well, I mean, at first I was kind of like scared, like first of
Sure.
all, state legislatures are like asked not to answer people from outside of their district. And I was glad that he did answer my request. And as a young kid who's growing up in a rural community, like I've kind of seen him as a mentor in the political field. I mean, he's a gay Democrat, and he's in the state house, and he's been there for a while, and he's done some great things, and a lot of the things I agree with. And so to like get his response, it was really inspiring. And his area is like in the Portland area, and so there, I would say that I guess the topic there isn't as controversial as other areas, but it's still going to be a controversial topic for sure.
So the initiative is to lower. It's pretty simple, to lower the voting age to 16. Is How does this legislatively take place? I mean, it's not something that's going to be on the ballot, right? This would be done in the state legislature. Is that correct?
No, actually. So
Okay.
first it'll move through the state legislature. It's in legislative council right now. Once the legislative session starts on January 9th, after Governor Tina Kotek is inaugurated, the bills will come in and things will be assigned numbers, and eventually Speaker Rayfield will assign the bill a number and to a committee. I'm not sure if he'll form a new committee or he'll assign it to a committee that's already in the state house. But from there, it'll move on, and if it passes the House, the Senate, and gets the governor's signature, it'll need the Oregon Secretary of State signature, and then the Secretary of State will need to file it, and it'll then become a ballot measure because it's a constitutional amendment.
So
And
it would be voted on.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wow, this is a huge undertaking. It's pretty cool. I mean, you've got, like you said, you got nothing but time, right? You're a kid. You don't have,
Exactly.
you're not working at the time being, I'm sure. Maybe soon, probably soon. So, I mean, I think it's awesome that you're trying to tackle it. If nothing else, the benefit of what's going to come from this is that you're going to learn the process. And that's
Exactly.
what, so that's incredible. Let's talk about the negative feedback. I know that there's got to have been some. I mean, and you can drop some names. I know you might not. I know you pretty well from just watching from afar that you're not really worried about ruffling feathers.
No.
So what is some of the negative feedback been?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is like the initial gut reaction that, oh, 16-year-olds aren't smart enough, they're not civically engaged, and their brains aren't fully matured. And I'd say all three of those are incorrect. Like, for instance, I mean, sure, your brain isn't fully matured until you're 21, but like the part of your brain that relies on voting relies on cold cognition, and that's something 16 and 17-year-olds have developed, and have used that they use that in classes, and they use that when they're at the job field, all sorts of things. On top of that, Oregon has a pretty well-rounded civic education, and students like me are learning about government, so why not be part of the process while learning about it?
Yeah, I know. So my stepsons went to McKenzie High School. And
Mm,
so I have a connection to McKenzie High School, and it's a it's a charter school. Is that correct?
yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
And yet I'm impressed with them. I think that they have a lot of knowledge about this kind of stuff. I think they're brash, just like typical young people, like I was at
Hmm.
that age too. And they have kind of a burn it down attitude sometimes. But that being said, I hear that from adults. I don't know how that's different from a 16-year-old or a 30-year-old that's just pissed off at the world. It's kind of, that's going to happen in society, right?
Exactly.
So, but my thoughts on that is that they are definitely educated enough to do it. I know that they know the process. One of my kids is actually studying history, and he's not fun to debate with. The benefits, I looked into some different things, and studies have shown that 16-year-olds have the necessary civic understanding and the cognitive ability to vote responsibly. And I
Hmm.
do think that it could improve the interest in civics for young people, because if you're not, able to vote until 18, that might be the beginning of when you're even thinking about it. I know
Exactly.
I read Austria has already lowered the voting age to 16, and it did greatly show that it raised a lot of civic and interest and engagement. So that's huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. A
Uh,
lot of countries have lowered the voting age to 16, including two cities in America.
yeah, yeah. Do you know which ones offhand?
One of them is in Maryland, and that's all I can remember.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you've been doing you've been doing the rounds, trying to do media interviews. I don't know if you've been on the podcast yet or from your first podcast, but I know you were on the news. Uh, and you've been learning a tremendous amount, I'm sure. What has been your biggest obstacle in getting this initiative off the ground?
Trying to get people to talk about it. The only way, I mean, this type of legislation has been proposed in the Oregon legislature before, and each time it's died in committee. And, I'm not working with an organization. I'm solely doing this myself, unlike other people. So I'm not tied to like specific rules on what I can and cannot do. And so my goal is to make sure this stays in the media and people are talking about it. Because if that happens, people are going to be writing to the legislatures about whether they support it or not. And that determines whether or not it stays in committee or it moves out of committee and gets voted on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know that when I was in school and I was 15, 16 years old, I just felt unheard. I felt unseen. I felt like there was no point in me even using my voice because no one would listen to it. And I would imagine, like you had said, in a rural community, even though McKenzie is its own breed, I mean, that area is interesting because I had a friend
Yeah,
tell me he said that they're dreadnecks. That's hippies with guns. But
exactly.
but he's like, it's cool when you go to the sporting events up there. For me, when I went up there, you would see people rocking camo next to a dude rocking hemp, and they were
Hmm.
buddies, and it was really cool. And so people would have all kinds of different belief systems, but at the school, it was all just out the door. Like that, people are like, we leave that at home, and that's
Yeah,
good to see. And the push for this, you're not talking about making 16-year-old Democrats vote.
no,
You're talking about making 16-year-old Americans vote, regardless of their
exactly.
belief system. And I think that it's going to be really difficult, like you had said. This isn't going to benefit one party or the other. It might benefit the right in a lot of ways, especially in rural communities, because people are going to
Absolutely.
kind of go with what their family says. But that's kind of the same as how it goes for everybody, because it's our job to influence, people to actually think about our, persuasive argument on the candidates or the issue, right? So you've ran campaigns. You know that sometimes when you explain it to someone, they're like, "Wait a minute, I didn't understand that. That's what was being
Hmm.
talked about." That's the whole thing, is getting the word out. So I mean, what do your fellow classmates think about this push? Have they had kind of much response to it?
I mean, no, not really. I mean, my class is probably the most politically engaged class in the high school, and I mean, some of them support it, some of them don't, and I totally see why. Um, I mean, I'm really the only one who's been out there and working through it. I mean, when it comes to my school, it's really the teachers that are like supporting this initiative, and I'm really happy for that. And even my history teacher, she doesn't support it, but she's been, happily helping me push this along, and she's even helped me look over the legislative council papers to make sure that there wasn't any language from the bill missing.
Wow, that's cool. And like I said before, I mean, what you're learning is amazing. And this is definitely a step. You will pass some kind of legislation in your lifetime. I think that's a given. So
Yeah.
and I think that you're dedicated to that. So this is a good place to start. What was the response from the news? Did they kind of take it serious, or were they kind of like, look at this goofiness?
I don't really know. I was
Yeah.
actually happy that they agreed to it. I mean, whether they want to talk about it negatively or not, I'm still out there talking about
I
it.
think they're just proud of you. I think that they're just proud. I haven't seen the clip. You posted the link, and I tried to click on it, and it was a live stream, and then it didn't. You had to catch it, and it was right on. So now, what are some of the core issues that you and your peers champion? You talked about your class, your specific year that you're in, being super interested in civics and in politics. What are some of the core issues that your peers champion?
Well, one of the biggest ones is definitely environmental justice. We're going to be inheriting a world where the environment is just a steaming pile of horseshit, and the adults in the room don't seem to be doing much about it. I mean, Oregon likes to pride itself on being the most environmentally friendly state, but I think there's much, much more that Oregon can do about it that we haven't done, or our politicians refuse to do.
Yeah. It sucks when it's politicized, because you have people thinking that it's like my dad, who, and I hate that I'm going to throw him under the bus, but there was a point during the Tea Party movement in 2009 where he's super conservative, and I love him, and I cherish his views. I mean, even though I feel like he's brainwashed, but he was saying that recycling is like green. He literally told me one time, he said, that green is the new red, like it's communism. And I'm like, recycling is communism? It's insane where we've gotten. But I think there's a lot of people in the middle that don't speak a lot because they're busy going to work and that kind of stuff, that actually do vote, that do want to see change. The issues are massive corporations, and that's the same with the in Oregon, the timber industry is very powerful, and so it's
Absolutely.
going to be difficult and whatnot. So would you say that you share consistent views with the majority of kids in your peer group, or are you kind of like fighting for the little guy?
No, absolutely not. I'm fighting for the little guy. Yeah. I grew up, I'm a survivor of domestic abuse. I've lived in apartments. I've lived off of just a little food. Sometimes we could afford clothes, but we'd have to go to a secondhand store to buy them. I've kind of seen what it's like to struggle. I'd say I'm a little more well off than others, and especially in Oregon. But I've gotten to see what it's like for other people to live in, especially because of the campaign work I've gone. I mean, I've walked around, the tents in Eugene, and I've gotten to talk with the homeless people to tell me what their life is like, and I think that's really important. So, and when it comes to my political views, I'd say I'm probably like the most left out of anyone in my class. Most people in our community are conservative, but they have we do agree on some things. And I really love that. I don't think it's all about breaking up and siding on this and that. It's all about unity, and we need to come together.
Well, I think there's everyone talks about division in this country, and I've been looking at it like this. There's two sides. There's a belief system in just unparalleled individualism, and nobody can get in my way, right, is one way of thinking. And then there's this other idea where it's about collectivism, and we need to make sure that we do it as much as we can to create equity for people. That's why I'm a progressive. That's why I'm a liberal. On the left, I have a lot of things on the left that I scoff at or roll my eyes about, because it's not necessarily about me. And that's the point. It's a big tent. It's a big umbrella. But we have to find ways to level the playing field. And unfortunately, it's the same thing. It's all money. I mean, and we know that. Everybody knows.
Absolutely.
That it's all, like we were watching last night, watching what was happening with the speaker and just the circus that's happening in the House. And the House is the most representative of our country, because it really gets people from each corner that win elections with like 2,000 votes sometimes.
Exactly.
So it's super small. And you may be a state representative or a congressman in like 10 years. It's like it's not that out of the realm of possibility if you really run with it. I don't know. We were talking about it, and my stepson was watching and just talking about how disgusted he is at the whole process, and not just the process, just how unrepresented that he feels. And I know that that's how young people feel, and that's why they're frustrated. I did hear an argument that someone made about the January 6th. Today is January 6th. So was it 2 years ago now, or was it last?
Yeah, 2 years.
And I did hear somebody say that there's a shared frustration that we need to find to explain to each other, even if we disagree. Because I'm not condoning what happened there. I've called it out numerous times. I'm not down with the violence and all that kind of stuff, and even sometimes destruction of property. Actually, most times I'm not down with. But I can see those people feel like it was the last chance, and that they were done with. And yeah, some of them, they were brainwashed and duped into doing that. But a lot of those people there have been made to believe that the Democrats are the devil. And so, I mean, it's just, we have to lower the temperature. We have to try to listen to each other. And so I don't know. I don't have a lot of hope right now. And I don't think very many people do. And I know young people don't. And I think that the goal is to keep people from having any hope, because then they won't get involved. And so I think what you're doing is really good. Yeah, you said that you just kind of cold called the news, that you've reached out. I know you emailed me, but I'm just some dude. But like, you know, some of the state representatives that you've reached out to, I did hear John Lively was not on board.
Yeah, he's not on board.
Not on board.
And and that's totally understandable. I know a lot of people from his district who are not on board. So, I mean, even if he personally supports it inside, I know that he wouldn't vote no. He wouldn't vote yes on it.
Sometimes I've found that, and I want to ask you something after this, but sometimes I've found that it's about priorities, right? Like it's like, this is something that would take so much of someone's attention that they're like, you know, I actually like it, and you got a lot of heart, kid. You know, but they're like, but I got to do these things. And, you know, there's only so much time between campaigning. It seems like campaigning is nonstop, that they have time to work on things. Now, one of the things that I've noticed in the short time that I've been friends with you on social media is that I've watched you kind of evolve from being a little bit more of an activist attitude to more willing to make concessions. At least, I don't know if it's intentional or if you can acknowledge it.
It's definitely.
You can see it. What is it that you've learned from doing this type of work that has kind of changed your look on actually getting stuff done? I know that this is a tall task, but just in general, because I know that you actually do have optimism that you can make change. So what is it that gives you that hope?
Oregonians. Working on political campaigns, I've gotten to meet so many people from all sorts of backgrounds, and I've gotten to know their story and what makes them who they are. And I feel for them. And seeing homeless people, I mean, I will literally cry when I see homeless people on the street who can't do anything about it. I mean, especially when it's not like a drug problem like the right likes to say it is, and it's a problem. I'm hoping that eventually I can do something about it, and my generation will do something about it. I mean, Maxwell Frost is the first Gen Z member of Congress ever elected, and he's not able to do anything right now because the House is playing games,
which is dangerous. I heard someone talking about this, and it's true. It's actually dangerous for our country because, I mean, we're always seconds away from going to war, and Congress isn't even there to vote on anything. And so, I mean, it's insanity what's happening.
It is.
And we're watching the circus unfold, but I don't know. I mean, and I think that the MAGA hat crowd is obviously losing steam, and young people by the numbers are not on board with that. They see through it a little bit differently because the pomp and circumstance, HD television and social media has changed the way that we see the world. We're like, look at that makeup line and all that kind of stuff. You guys have seen the world way different than we have. I was raised in a time that we, were basically taught this kind of patriotism that was just like American exceptionalism. And some of it's I still believe, and some of it I know is not true, like Christopher Columbus, So now I read something in the Oregon Capitol Chronicle. They wrote a little excerpt about you, and I wanted to bring it up to our last question. So in 1971, the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. This is federally. And 1 year earlier, a senior at Lewis and Clark College in Portland led an unsuccessful effort to pass an initiative to lower the voting age in Oregon to 19. That student, Earl Bloomhauer, went on to represent the Portland area in Congress now for more than 25 years. So then my next question is, what is the future for Devon Lawson?
Well, after I complete my secondary education, I do plan on holding office. I'm going to start locally, obviously, with state representative, and I hope to represent Oregon throughout the years and maybe even make it federally.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen what you can do on Twitter. You're pretty active on there, and you've got a little bit of a following going. and young people understand social media a lot, but social media, it's been interesting what it's done to muddy the waters of politics, but also give kind of access to more people that have never had access. So it's just an emerging, changing world, right? I mean, that's kind of how it is. It's constantly evolving. So, well, Devon Lawson McCourt, thank you so much. I mean, it's so cool. I'm, it's cool to finally meet you. We've talked quite a bit behind the scenes. Anytime you have any podcasts that you want to spotlight, you got people in the community you want to spotlight, send them my way. I'm always going to be down to help. Yeah, this is going to be a tall undertaking. There's no two ways about it. I think you know
Absolutely.
that. My show, that's what it's all about. If you look at the track record of the candidates that I've had, it's a lot of, smaller represented candidates, and it's really difficult to get your name out there. So, I mean, I do the little bit that I can. And my goal is that there's going to be 25 or 30 of me in my town doing the same thing. And we can make 50 people, and then we make it 100. So hopefully you've inspired some people in your class to actually get involved. Because I think that what they can see is you're actually getting stuff done. You're actually getting the ear of the representatives. And so that's a huge accomplishment. And so
absolutely,
you should be proud of that. So yeah, sophomore student at McKenzie High School, Devon Lawson McCourt. Devon, thank you so much.
Thank you.